Welcome to part 8, Communications in Tinkerbell franchise. We're going to be looking at the communication process in this video. The communication process starts with a sender or a messenger who is sending a message, but they have to encode it in some way. And then a receiver who has to decode the message to understand it accurately. And then the receiver can send feedback back to the sender, often using the same process of encoding and decoding. Noise is anything that will interfere with this process or cause the message to not be received as it was meant to be. And the channel is if it's through voice or text or reading, any of those types of things.
Queen Clarion, why?
Tinkerbell. Long ago, when Pixie Hollow was very young, two fairies met and fell in love. One of them was a winter fairy,
and the other was from the warm seasons. The two fairies were enchanted with each other, and every sunset they met at the border.
where spring touches winter. But as their love grew stronger, they wished to be together.
And share each other's worlds. So they disregarded the danger and crossed.
One of them broke a wing, for which there is no cure.
From that day forward, Queen Clarion decreed that fairies must never again cross the border. And I agreed that our two worlds should forever remain apart.
And the two fairies? What happened to them?
They had to say goodbye.
Queen Clarion.
All right, so in this communication between Queen Clarion and the Lord of Winter with Periwinkle and Tinkerbell, we assume that they're getting the same message completely. The sender is Queen Clarion or Lord Mallory, and they're sending a message that crossing the border is dangerous and they should not do it. And many people have to give up being with people that they love in order for the safety of all. So the encoding was converting the story in their brains into words to convey to Periwinkle and Tinkerbell. The message was, as I just said, the danger to cross the border, and the channel was using their voices to tell them out loud to Tink and Periwinkle. Tink and Periwinkle did understand the message and sent feedback of being sad that she understands she'll no longer be able to see Periwinkle, and we assume that Perry also reacted that way with Lord Mallory. There was no obvious noise in the situation. There was no obvious outside environment that would block the communication, and it does seem that the message was accurately received from Queen and Lord. And then with active listening, you have to be involved in the listening process to make sure that you're understanding the other's messages. Tink and Perry both asked, and the other fairies, what happened to them? And that was part of their active listening because they were clarifying the sender's messages. There are some barriers to communication. One is selective perception. It's when we interpret what we hear based on our personal interests, expectations, or experiences, rather than how things really are. This would be if someone told me something, but I interpreted it through the lens of a long-distance runner versus a sprinter, I might misunderstand a message because I am running it through my past experiences as a cross-country runner as opposed to someone who might run a 100-meter dash in track. Filtering would be when we're receiving way too much information all at once, so we reduce the amount of information that we actually receive and interpret. This could be someone sitting in class and not taking in much more information because they've already taken in way too much that day. Organizational barriers could be hard between different levels of management because upper management is looking at the big picture versus lower level people might be just worried about the day-to-day issues. We could definitely see this one in Pixie Hollow because Queen Clarion and Lord Mallory definitely saw the bigger picture of why it's important not to cross the border and why it's safer for everyone, versus Tinkerbell and Periwinkle are just worried about being able to see their long-lost sister and not really worried about the overall safety of individual fairies on a bigger scale. Some cultural barriers that people may run into is how in low context cultures versus high context cultures. In low context cultures, we rely on words to convey our meaning versus high context, where the situation and nonverbal cues are mostly used to convey meaning. An example of this being an issue is if you went into a store and you asked for berries, but you didn't clarify what kind, but you were standing next to a sign that had strawberries on it and kind of pointed to it when you were asking the employee, and that's a nonverbal cue to convey your meaning. When you said berries, you meant strawberries. And I'll see you in part 9.